Spider-Man No Way Home is finally in theaters, so it only makes sense that I go back and rank all 9 theatrically released Spider-Man films from my least favorite to my favorite. And don't worry, because this is still going to be a spoiler-free zone for anyone who has not seen Spider-Man No Way Home yet, even though if you haven't, what are you doing? Please, go watch it as soon as you can. Spider-Man is my favorite character of all time, so naturally, this was a very fun list to make, but very hard at the same time. Some of my picks are going to be controversial, and that's okay, but the most important thing for this video is for you guys to comment down below and let me know what your rankings are. What is your favorite? What is your least favorite Spider-Man movie? I need to know all of that in the comments below. I told you that this list was going to get controversial. Little did you know it was going to start with number 9, because I am just not a big fan of Far From Home. I think I strongly dislike this movie. It's one of my least favorite MCU films in general, and it just was a big bummer for me. I remember coming out of it the first time wanting to believe that I loved it, but my opinion continued to sour on the film the more I thought about it. Just everything that seemed okay at first just began to fall apart. I think this is the film that suffers the most from that stereotypical MCU formula. I also think that it has an over-reliance on the CGI that does not always look great. Like, there are moments to where in a live action movie, it looks like you're watching a Saturday morning cartoon. Not because it's fun and whimsical, but because it's so animated and off-putting that it takes you completely out of the film. But even aside from those nitpicks, I think my biggest issue is the main plot of the movie. It's just not very believable for me that after Peter Parker was blipped for 5 years as a teenager, that when he comes back and Tony Stark dies, his last dying wish is to give Peter these glasses that pretty much give him all of the power in the world at the palm of his hand. Not to mention, the decision looks even worse, as the Peter that is present in this film almost looks like he regressed as a character and he took a couple steps back mentally and maturity wise. He is extremely immature, makes all of the wrong decisions, and you can argue that yes, he is a very vulnerable teenager who is naive and going through a lot of different changes, but he was smarter in pretty much every other movie before this. I just feel like they didn't know where to progress with the character at this point, so it just felt like a jumbled mess. It also felt like a story that never gave the character of Peter Parker any room to breathe. In this movie alone, we dealt with the grief of Tony Stark's passing. Nick Fury crashes his summer vacation. The main villain of this movie is not even focused on Peter, but getting revenge on Tony Stark for doing him wrong when he worked at Stark Industries. The fact that this movie cannot be fully enjoyed unless you have complete knowledge of the entire MCU timeline, Endgame, The Blip, Nick Fury, all of this previous information, it really sours the overall experience. It feels like a test that you have to study weeks in advance for, instead of just the ultimate Spider-Man adventure that you can just jump in and enjoy at any time. I do enjoy the chemistry between Peter and MJ. They have a relationship that feels very awkward and unsure exactly what a high school romance would be in real life. I also think that there's a few sequences throughout, in particular the Mysterio illusion sequence on Spider-Man, that was very, very well done. While some of the visuals didn't work for me, that is one of the instances that it really, really worked, and I think they really pulled it off. It's just too bad that the film is mainly surrounded by a ton of bad. From here on out, I genuinely like every other film on this list. Like I said, Spider-Man is my favorite character, so as long as you do him justice, I'm going to have a good time no matter what shape or form that comes in. So just keep that in mind, that even though my number 8 is pretty low, I still have fun with it. Spider-Man 3, oddly enough, was my favorite Spider-Man movie as a kid. I remember watching 1 and 2 over and over and over again until I got the 3rd DVD, and I watched that thing until it was scratched and literally broken and could not be played anymore. I drove my family crazy because I was obsessed with it. I didn't fully understand the makings of a good movie back then, and I understand now definitely that it's very messy and it's got a lot of plot contrivances and things that don't necessarily work that well, but I still to this day have a lot of fun with the movie. It definitely goes to some weird lengths, with Peter having very much a big existential crisis, going into full Bully Maguire mode, to where he's dressing up with black bangs and doing dances and shooting pointer finger guns at girls that walk by. It's insane, but it's fun. It's also hard to argue with the fact that Topher Grace as Venom was just a poor miscast and a missed opportunity to provide a great iteration of Venom. I think the design of the character looks great. I think the graphics and the visuals are very well done. I just don't feel like him as an actor fits the same persona that you're looking for with a Venom character, and it all comes off sort of goofy and uneven and just tonally inconsistent. But everything from Harry's descent into madness, the struggling on the rocks relationship once again between Peter and MJ, and especially Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman, it all works for me so well, especially Sandman. I think he's one of the most underappreciated villains, and everything that his character offers within the film is top tier Spider-Man villain content. I think he just portrays the character so well. He fills it with so much regret and emotion and just vulnerability that just seeps through in every moment of screen time that he has. And if you watch the producer's cut of Spider-Man 3, it not only improves the film as a whole, but especially his backstory and his character arc overall as someone who is just a good guy caught up in a bad situation. Also, Black Suit Spider-Man just looks so dang good. There are so many things to love about this movie, but it definitely gets much better from here. Now, I feel lucky enough to say that I actually grew up with all three iterations of Spider-Man, but I have to claim Andrew as my favorite. He is my Spider-Man. Something about his charisma, his charm, the way that he comes off and plays the character as a whole, both as Peter and as Spider-Man, just really works for me. And when they promised that this was going to be an untold version of the story that we had not seen before, man, I got my hopes up. I was still young, and I went into this film and loved every second of it, and I still really enjoy this movie. I think it's much more darker, it's a little bit more moody, and we're seeing a side of Peter that we had not seen before, also getting that extra addition of the exploration of his parents' backstory, what happened to them, and what would actually go through the mind of Peter if he's thinking about his parents, wondering where they went, and feeling that sense of abandonment. And while I'm not too crazy about Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben, I definitely think Sally Field is the best Aunt May that we've ever gotten. She's extremely relatable, and she's got such a great dynamic with Andrew Garfield as Peter that you really feel for her, and especially after she loses Uncle Ben, trying to find that sort of just independence on her own and navigate raising a teenager. It's powerful stuff. But no doubt the thing that works about The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which we will talk about later, is the relationship between Peter and Gwen, and just the chemistry that Andrew and Emma Stone have throughout this series. It's just unmatched. It feels so raw, feels so relatable and realistic. Mark Webb directed these films, and he is just so good at bringing out this sense of realism that you see it and it feels so honest. It feels like something that any of us would have in real life with someone that we really care about, someone that we're just getting to know, but that maybe we fall in love with. Just the romance here is so top tier, and it's unbeatable. There has never been this great of a connection between Peter and one of his love interests besides what we see here with Andrew and Gwen Stacy. I do, however, feel like it plays it a little bit safe. When it said that it was the untold story, it didn't necessarily deliver too much that was very much outside of the norm of a Peter Parker Spider-Man story. It just tweaked a few details here and there. None of it's inherently bad. I enjoyed all of it. It just also didn't take too many big risks that elevate it any higher. I still remember the day the entire internet freaked when Spider-Man was introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, something that had been teased for years, but they finally delivered on it, and it was with a new Spider-Man, Tom Holland, the youngest actor to ever portray the character, when he swings in Civil War and says,
Hey everyone.
Good job.
Everyone couldn't wait to see what was in store for this character, and then we got Spider-Man Homecoming in 2017, and it was definitely a crowd pleaser, a film that I really enjoy. It's lighthearted, it's whimsical, it's a harmless, fun Spider-Man story that gives us the portrayal of the most innocent, the most unassuming, and the most just childlike Peter Parker that we had ever gotten. I think Tom Holland really does a great job. He has so much charisma, and you can tell he's just having fun with the role. And his introduction was definitely a fun one. We get to see him climb through the ranks of first starting off as a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, just trying to find crime on the streets. But then Vulture comes into the picture, one of the best MCU villains, played by Michael Keaton. The intimidation factor of his character is just top-notch, and I truly believe that if Thanos didn't exist, he might have been the greatest threat that any hero had met up to that point. I love the fact that when you look at it, he's not really a bad guy. He's just a good guy trying to support his family, but going about it in not such a great way. Sort of like the Walter White of the MCU. I'm not the first person to say that. Also, that car interrogation sequence where Vulture is talking to Spider-Man after he finds out that Spider-Man is Peter Parker and is in fact dating his daughter is so intense. It had me on the edge of my seat. So much suspense was built in that moment, and I think it was very well executed. Overall, Jon Watts has done a great job at providing this John Hughes-esque sort of superhero film that is very much in light of those teen comedies from the 80s, but still has that superhero and Marvel Cinematic Universe edge to it. It fits within the formula, but it has a little bit extra personality. I will say that I still have a pretty big issue with the lack of individuality that this Peter Parker has received, at least up to that point, and I don't always like the inclusion of Tony Stark as Iron Man. It really feels like they're trying to fill that Uncle Ben size gap in the universe, and so they add Tony Stark in there as that mentor slash father figure to provide the guidance for him. But ultimately, I do feel like, especially later on, the over-reliance of Tony has sort of held back the character of Peter Parker from growing on his own. But here, I don't necessarily enjoy it, but it's passable enough. I know many of you will have this movie at number 1, and that's completely understandable because this is definitely one of the greats. This is a top tier comic book movie of all time, and all of the praises that this film gets are completely justified. I think Alfred Molina is one of the greatest comic book movie villains of all time as Dr. Octavius. Again, a situation of a good guy trying to do big things and it just goes wrong, and his life's work sort of corrupts him and creates a villain. He creates a monster. It's not necessarily something he wanted to become, but I also love the way that Peter is having to really go through this mental examination of himself, having to decide, does he really want to be Spider-Man anymore? Because with that comes so much compromise, and it comes so much complications with his relationships and with his personal life, that if he continues, he might not be able to live his life to the fullest ability that he hoped he could. It also contains just some of the best moments of any Spider-Man film and comic book film ever, whether it's the train sequence between Peter and Doc Ock, whether it's the moment to where Peter is laying on the floor of that subway train and the entire city of New York agrees to keep his identity a secret. That entire sequence right there is so powerful, and it just showed what greater value being the hero, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man holds overall. Raimi just knows how to make a Spider-Man movie, and he's proven that time and time again. Blade and Spider-Man definitely have to get the most credit for revitalizing the superhero genre and really building up to what it has become today, because up until this point, they were a little bit stale, they were a little bit dormant, there wasn't as many being made, and if they were, they weren't as good as we expect to see today. But this is the movie that I remember seeing when I was about 3 years old on DVD, and I was just absolutely in love. It became my favorite movie. It became my favorite character. Seeing the way that Peter Parker transformed into Spider-Man, seeing him go through these struggles every single day, seeing the relationship and the dynamic between him and his aunt and uncle. I couldn't fully grasp the brilliance back then, but now I'm able to appreciate it on so many more levels than I was before. Also, Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin is my favorite Spider-Man villain. I'll just get that out of the way. I think he's the absolute best, especially when it comes to the live action portrayals. He just has such a maniacal presence that is always there and so menacing, and he is the first person and character on a big screen to ever scare me and give me nightmares. The sequence to where he's jumping out of the chamber after being absorbed by the green gas and it all going wrong, that sequence where he kills his partner scared the living crap out of me as a kid. As well as the transformative sequence where Peter actually turns into Spider-Man, you know, where you see everything going through his blood vessels and the veins and all that stuff. This movie's got a dark edge to it. That's Raimi for you. Tobey is funny, awkward, he's very hopeful, but also just so confused, and all of those emotions really show throughout the entire performance in this movie. And people say often that this is the most comic book accurate portrayal of the character, and while I disagree, it's still pretty dang close, and I can't help but love every second of screen time that he has. And every single time I go back and rewatch this movie, I forget just how brutal it actually is. Like, that final battle between Spider-Man and Green Goblin is so dark, it's so gritty, but it's some of the best superhero action that we've ever received, even to this day. It's really weird putting a Sony animated Spider-Man film so far up on my list, because I remember when the trailers came out for this, every time I watched it I said, I'm not gonna like that. I'm gonna hate that. It's gonna suck. They have a terrible track record right now. And then I went in to watch this movie and I was just absolutely blown away. It's got so much character, so much heart. It's hard to say that there's ever been more time and effort put into making such a great piece of animation and great Spider-Man film in general, because you can just feel the heart and the emotion pouring out over this entire movie. The creators of this love the character of Spider-Man, and they love the fans, they love the theater experience, and they crafted something that just works on every single level. Also, we got the introduction of Miles Morales and his camaraderie with Peter B. Parker, the mentorship that he forms, and the way that he really comes into his own as the Spider-Man of that universe by the end of the film is just so great to see. I can't wait for the day that Miles Morales crosses over into live action, because he's just become one of my favorite portrayals of the character. It's extremely hilarious and self-aware, but it's also very emotional, and it stays true to the core values of the character, as well as reiterating the idea that anyone can wear the mask, and you just have to be able to step up and give it your all. You have to be invested, you have to believe in yourself, and anything is possible. And this is a movie that will touch all people of all ages who watch it. It's also just got a great soundtrack. I'm a sunflower, man. Believe the hype. It's that high on my list. I'm completely confident in that it could possibly go up to number one as time goes by, because No Way Home is a film that I was extremely skeptical of, and while I had theories and predictions for what could happen, I just wanted a solid movie, and it exceeded my expectations, and it completely delivered. It brought back so much nostalgia with these villains that we grew up knowing and loving, and it wasn't just for fan service alone. They actually had a reason to be there. The plot itself was so great. Finally, Tom Holland's Peter Parker got the sense of individuality. He was very fleshed out. It's extremely emotional. It's got action sequences that are brutal and exciting and really matches some of the best of the entire franchise. It has so many twists and turns that all fans are going to love, and it's hard to ever predict what's going to happen. You just have to watch it. You have to experience and let it take you on that ride. It wasn't what I expected. It was better, and it's one that I'm going to rewatch again and again and again. And as a lifelong fan of the character, it gave me everything I could have possibly wanted. Man, it's hard to not talk about spoilers. I truly feel like The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the most true to who Spider-Man is as a character. Andrew Garfield, like I said, is my favorite Spider-Man, and he is my favorite Peter Parker. I think the romance that worked so well with Andrew and M. Stone in the first film is expanded upon and even deeper and more enjoyable here. They have to go through so many complications. Andrew is really struggling with the idea of loving her and giving into this relationship, even though her father, who passed away in the previous film, specifically asked him to leave her out of it because the people that get close to him end up getting hurt. They end up dying. And then by the end of the film, when we see Gwen Stacy's death actually take place, it's the most gut-wrenching scene. It might be one of my favorite scenes in any movie I've ever seen, not because it makes me happy, but because it got such an emotional response out of me that it's only natural that it happens to the character, but you never get used to seeing it happen. It's the first film to really show just what kind of consequences come with putting on the mask, and especially when you do exactly what her father wanted him not to do, which is put those people you love in the face of danger. But even before the large scale of the story was implemented, you also get to see that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man side. You get to see him stop the robbers. You get to see him help out the cops. You get to see him stop a kid from getting bullied and help fix his science project. All those little scenes really impacted me. Andrew Garfield is just so charismatic. I think he's my favorite working actor today, and he really gave it his all with Spider-Man. You can tell that this is a character he's extremely passionate about because it really seeps through his performance every single time he speaks a word. You can just see it, and the emotion that's written all over his face is prevalent throughout all of his work as Spider-Man. It still kills me to this day that he was not able to get his third movie, because I think he more than deserved it. Even if people dislike the movie, there's nothing you can say bad about what Andrew Garfield was able to do with the character, because I truly think it is the best portrayal we've ever gotten. Not to mention, it has the best web slinging, it has the best looking action sequences, it is the best visually pleasing movie of them all, and it's got one of the greatest scores of any Spider-Man movie ever. Hans Zimmer killed it. It's immensely rewatchable and has been my favorite Spider-Man film since I saw it opening night in the theater back in 2014. It has its flaws, but I feel like it really embraces them, acknowledges that they are there, but realizes that Spider-Man is a flawed character. Peter Parker, at the end of the day, is a human being, so naturally there are going to be those bumps in the road. It is perfectly imperfect, and I can't help but absolutely love it. So once again, now that I've given my ranking, like I said, make sure to comment down below and let me know what you guys think, one, of my ranking, but also give me your own, from your least favorite to your favorite. I love to hear what you guys have to say. I know many of you might not have seen No Way Home yet, but as soon as you do, make sure to let me know your thoughts of that movie. Also, check out my spoiler-free review. I will have a spoiler review coming very, very soon. But guys, thank you as always for watching this video. Thank you for continuing to support me. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification, because there's so much great content coming your way very, very soon. We're about to end this year extremely strong, but I really appreciate you guys. And until next time, I'll see y'all later. Peace out.